What have we got? Here is the Times, obviously, Tiger Woods on the front page and the back page. You know it's always a big news story when you're in front and back. And also John Delaney, he may be forced out of the FAI today is the headline there. And Woods, they're calling him a walking miracle.
Yeah, obviously the Times has Tiger at the top. Tiger's comeback for the ages. Klopp blown away by the brilliant Salah. Stunning finish at the bottom there. And if you flick to the back page, interesting article for racing fans. Why introducing new whip rules for jockey is a sensible move, and that's Brian O'Connor, who is an excellent judge of racing and writes very thought-provoking articles. They've just changed the whip rules in Ireland.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, you'd be better to explain that now than most people. What?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. They've capped the amount of times a horse can be hit. Now, most people listening to this show probably don't understand. The whip is a misnomer in many respects in racing. It's not a whip. It's basically a piece of whatever it is, a piece of rubber that makes a cracking tight noise, but actually doesn't hurt the horse at all. If I whipped you on the hand, it literally doesn't hurt. So you can imagine a horse, like, it doesn't hurt them at all. But the crack noise kind of just, it clicks with their brain just to kind of run a bit faster. It doesn't hurt them at all, basically. So, but it obviously, because it asks them for a bit more energy.
I was going to say, could you argue that you're still putting them under pressure because they hear that crack and then they're thinking, I must go faster?
Yeah, but it's I suppose the main thing, the whip, you could have raced without a whip, but as a corrective measure in terms of the safety of the rider primarily, just it balances like particularly errant horses, just kind of keeps them straight when they're going off course. But the Irish authorities have brought in a cap on how many times you can whip a horse at the discretion of the steward. So if a horse is completely acting a maggot, they'll give you a bit of leeway.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a bad thing. It's been described as a bit of a fudge as well, and sometimes the Turf Club bring in these rules and they start off well and they, smack a few lads on the hand, but then they kind of just let things go back to normal. But it's probably not a bad thing.
Okay, and we also have the Irish Daily Mirror here, and again the sport just goes to show what a great weekend it was in new sport in front and back pages. It's going to the wire, obviously talking about the Premier League. Tiger Rose, you are done. Delaney, John Delaney is there. And redemption, obviously Tiger Woods wearing the red t-shirt of a Sunday, things are going well.
Well, that's actually quite remarkable, because the Star is the same thing. There are three things on the front page: Masterclass, D-Day for Delaney, and no slip-ups for Poole. They're all sport. Now, sport is the great triviality, in fairness. I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter in terms of how life operates, but there you are anyway. Back page, Delaney could exit today. Cry of the Tiger, quite nice, and Mo's perfect response. Great to see Salah, in fairness, back to a bit of form and what he was doing last season.
And the Irish Sun, again, we have John Delaney, the front page. Squeaky bum time is the headline there. And the back page, sensational Woods wins 5th Masters. Tiger embraces son 22 years after father. It's a real full circle going there. I'm the daddy. There's the headline.
That's a lovely headline. Obviously, the recollection of meeting his father, which he discussed in that rather weird butler's cabin interview type thing, where it was kind of like 5 extremely boring lads that don't drink, like kind of just talking over tea on a Sunday morning or something. Of course, it's perfectly acceptable not to drink, but they were quite boring. But the greatest, this is the Irish Daily Mail. Masterful Tiger wins first major in 11 years. Delaney on the brink, axe to fall as FAI ready to announce major shake-up, which is interesting because nobody really seems to know what's going to happen there. And that's the Daily Mail.
And we have the Herald here. We have Magic Moment, which is obviously Mo Salah's magic goal yesterday, which was amazing. Back page, obviously Tiger Rose, bit of a pun there, back years. And we also have Mo Magic, FAI grant threat as Delaney nears exit, which is of course something people will be very worried about. And an interesting point as well, Rory O'Carroll and Diarmuid Connolly both back playing for clubs in Dublin.
Yeah, Davy Russell actually put up a tweet last night saying he heard a rumour that Tiger Roll was going to be ridden by Tiger Woods at the Grand National next year, which would be a great story, really. And known Tiger, there's probably nothing stopping him from actually achieving that. This is the Daily Telegraph Sport, the greatest, and one paper that John Delaney can probably buy this morning if he wants to see nothing about himself.
Anything else left there?
I think that's it. Yeah,
Irish
unless
news?
you want the...
Here we go.
The Aldi,
Tiger Woods again.
The Aldi brochure here. And
the Aldi.
Tiger Roars back, and
Oran McNeil.
Yeah, I'll sit out the Donegal campaign. It'll be interesting. We're obviously coming into the championship soon, but the narrative has definitely switched a bit in terms of, we'll talk a bit about Dublin, but the likes of Donegal will consider themselves in with a fair chance getting to the Super 8s. And once you're into Super 8s this year, you'd never know. There'll be one team in the Super 8s that has absolutely no chance to win the All-Ireland, maybe two.
Yeah.
But 5 or 6 will be there thinking if they can possibly avoid Dublin, because Dublin could lose at the semi-final stage, just depending on how things work out. It might be an interesting year just yet.
Yeah, and we've the Irish Indo as well, should be popping up there on screen. Obviously, again, Tiger Woods, the big shot there. It's a great shot when you can actually see everyone cheering him on.
Not on their phones.
No, not for once, exactly. Yeah, they're actually watching this.
Which is a great thing in Augusta, because they don't allow you to have your phone in, as far as I know. You have to have you're either, as far as I know, you can't have your phone on you at all. There's some quite, notionally archaic rules in Augusta.
Etiquette.
But it's like, these things should be encouraged more, where basically you're banned from using your phone, just because it's better for everyone anyway, because it's like a third arm at this stage where you can't function without it. And it's sad watching guys taking, all these photos of lads taking a corner or whatever, just because they can. It's just like, well, you're at a sporting event, like, you not just watch the game.
Yeah.
And we're all guilty of it, I suppose, but it's definitely something that I thought was quite refreshing, in terms of something that was quite archaic but definitely actually works.
Wimbledon as well is very strict. I've been there a few times. I know it's politely strict. You're very much gently reminded to do this and do that. And like, sometimes you feel you can't even sneeze, like during a rally or something, the noise, and people are only allowed to move at certain times, and it's really, really, really respected. Like, nobody would think, no, maybe it's a different type of person who maybe goes in there as well. I don't know, that there might be more genteel than we would be. I don't know. But you kind of feel like you'd be afraid to leave your handbag down too loudly or something, But I think it makes a difference, like you said, because people are actually enjoying the moment.
Of course, yeah. And it's just a constant distraction, where you feel you have to tell people you're there. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I think that's, we had the Indo headline up there as well, did we? We did. So we've had all the papers there now. So we just get into a few stories. I suppose the big one really is the FAI, and
what's
most
been
of the
happening
papers,
there?
it's D-Day for Delaney, and that's what you said earlier. We kind of don't know what's going to happen today.
Yeah, it's developed quite, I suppose, fast. I just wanted to bring a bigger point here. Journalism is in major kind of flux for the last 10, 15 years, because of, it's hard to imagine life before the internet, but it did happen. And in those days, when I got into journalism, the internet was something that was sort of taken off, but I think it was probably even before the time of text messages, so they seem like simpler times, and actually makes me seem quite old.
I feel like asking, what age are you?
Yeah, well, when I was in college, I was the only one in my class who didn't have a mobile phone in first year, because I was kind of like reluctant. And then
What year were you in first year?
2000.
You're only a year ahead of me, so I was in 01, yeah.
But anyway, so journalism, I had an aspiration of being, I suppose, I went in there wanting to be a football journalist, whatever, but it was all about the newspaper. And it was great how newspapers were so, dominant in terms of the narrative of the discussion of the time and all that. And then they had to embrace the internet. Some newspapers gave away their content for free. And I think that was quite damaging, in the sense of everyone from a generation after me expected their news for free, and they just didn't buy newspapers. So newspapers are going to die off in the next few years in Ireland, for 100%, and it's going to be difficult. And people don't buy newspapers anymore. I don't buy newspapers as much as I did, but I'd willingly pay subscriptions. And what the Sunday Times have done with the FAI stuff just goes to show the value of proper journalism, because Mark Tighe in the Sunday Times effectively has brought down the FAI structure almost single-handedly. He started the process that brought the Oireachtas Committee into being, and this is journalism at its absolute best, where after years and years and years of not being able to tell this story because of fears of maybe litigation or whatever, they went after a story and they've exposed something extremely rotten, regardless of how much we know, and I don't think we know anywhere near the amount that actually will come out. They've brought down, they will bring down one of the biggest kind of sporting personalities in Ireland, who, in my view, I think the FAI have done a lot of damage to Irish football. So I think this is absolutely marvellous for journalism, what's happened. And what happens as well is, and you know this as well, because Mark got the ball rolling, there's an absolute fight then for all these journalists who share their copy at these kind of insipid press days. All of a sudden now they're battling against each other to get the next story and the next break in the story. And that's proper journalism, and we really need that. We need people to pay. We need people to buy subscriptions. We need people to buy newspapers. And it's fantastic what's happened here. And what will happen today is, I understand from reading the papers this morning, and there's some great stuff in minute is that probably John Delaney will be gone, but there's a lot of procrastination. I mean, they met, the board, I believe, met on Saturday, so I don't really know why there's such a big delay, but just from reading the papers, it seems that Daniel MacDonald made the point in the Irish Independent today that there's anger that John Delaney's kind of leaking to, I think, his friend in Kerry.
Put a tweet out there last night.
We have an FNI statement from Dan, but it's not to do with the position of John Delaney. Instead, a response to Sport Ireland funding concern.
That was last night, yeah.
So in Dan's article today, he makes the point that there's anger among one or two, if not more, board members that it sounds like John Delaney's leaving on his own terms and he's kind of jumping before he's pushed because of the message relayed via his friend in Kerry, I think, who was on RT. So that's interesting. And this doesn't surprise me more because it's just what happened at the Oireachtas committee last Wednesday. I struggle to see how this is Mark McCann. Mark McCann, this isn't like, ticking the boxes until you can kind of go out again after a month of sobriety or whatever. This is like the X-Marks and FEI statement relating to government's 9 since March 16th. It was, if this were a cafe loyalty card, they'd be entitled to a free latte. Very good for Mark McCadden. But it's not surprising, if you are to believe what you believe, that some of the board members are unhappy with John Delaney because of his performance last Wednesday, where he basically absolved himself from talking. And I thought that was really, really poor.
But he would argue, and he's absolutely right to argue, that is his legal right to do so.
He's not absolutely right to at all. Well, he had legal advice with regard to something. That was the greatest cop-out. I mean, legal advice with regard to...
You can say it's a cop-out, but he will argue very vociferously that it is legal advice.
He had legal advice with regard to the 100 grand loan, which is one thing. He could easily... He answered questions when he wanted to in the second half of the show. So he basically... the legal advice was a cop-out for other things he didn't want to answer. And there's no way he couldn't have answered other questions. And it was very, very hard for some of the other members to answer questions that really should have been answered by him, and they were made to look like idiots, and I think they were probably quite angry coming out of it, and I'd love to be a fly in the wall as to the conversations they're having with them, but these are revolutionary days for Irish football. Philip Quinn has a very interesting article in the Mail about what needs to happen. John Byrne, who was involved and seemingly had a falling out with Delaney on the board a few years ago, he's interviewed, I think, by Paul Lennon in the Star about what needs to happen, but we need a complete root and branch change, and we need basically everyone on the board to leave and have a bit of dignity, and for once in this country have a bit of accountability and say, I was accountable partly for this. I was on a board that was dysfunctional. I probably was on a board that didn't look after Irish football properly, and for the best of Irish football now, I will step down and let somebody else come involved because it's needed. The League of Ireland has been neglected in a disgraceful manner, and it's thrived to some extent within itself. It's gotten very little help from the FAI. We've a situation...
Nearly argued they've thrived in spite of.
In spite of, yeah. I mean, speaking to the League of Ireland, some League of Ireland, I've spoken to Gary Rogers, who's part of the PFAI statement. There's huge anger there, huge anger. There was an article in the Business Post yesterday, and somebody was quoted, unnamed, who basically said, we've no idea how much of the SSE electricity money goes into the League of Ireland. We don't know how much actual money goes in terms of sponsorship of the League of Ireland. So there are affiliation fees for the likes of Finn Harps, who are struggling, 300 people at the game the other night. They have to pay the guts of 20 grand in licensing fees for the year. They're not going to get any prize money. So how are they functioning without TV money or prize money? And then you've a guy reputedly, anyway, spending 4 grand on his credit card in 6 months. I mean...
Well, interesting that you do mention League of Ireland. And I know the thing with John Delaney is we are talking a bit in a vacuum at the moment because there'll be more stuff happening today. So I'm very aware that, we're talking, we don't really know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but John Delaney is more than entitled to tell us what's wrong with anything that was being in the paper the last few days.
What we do know is that League of Ireland is happening again tonight. And that is a good, there's good stories to be told, and maybe this might be the situation now. This broom is coming in, let's clean things out, and we can actually talk about football that's actually happening and stuff.
I was at Shamrock Rovers Waterford the other night. Jack Byrne was playing. Jack Byrne, who was once, I suppose the love child in some respects of the Manchester City guys who were there and loved him. Now things have maybe not happened for him, but he's back in Ireland, he's enjoying his football. Shamrock Rovers have gotten to where they are because they've developed a youth structure and they've gotten some European prize money over the last few years, and the game the other night was exceptionally enjoyable. But they didn't do that because of help from above, in my view. They did it because they looked at the potential of Shamrock Rovers on the premise that we could make money from selling players like Bazuna and Graham Burke, and we could make money from Europe. And that's how they're basically being funded. Not from League of Ireland prize money, because it effectively doesn't exist. But anyway, what happened the other night was quite astonishing. Shamrock Rovers have gone so far ahead of Dundalk now, 13 points, albeit with 2 games more played, that Dundalk are playing Bohemians tonight. Bows are second. Dundalk absolutely have to win this game tonight. Big pressure on Vinnie Perth and his management team, because if they don't win tonight, I think it's basically game over.
Is it as simple as just new management still trying to bed in Dundalk, or is there something deeper going on?
I don't know if there's anything deeper going on, Maura. I mean, what happened was they lost 3 of their main midfielders in the first few weeks of the year. You can't legislate for that. Despite the cover that they've had, that's hard to deal with. But they were very, very poor by all accounts in Sligo the other night. I talked to Arthur O'Dea, the Sligo Rovers fan, in the office earlier, and he was just saying the vibe was how well Sligo played down there. But Dundalk were quite poor, and they were quite poor. They're quite poor against Pats, and it's difficult for Vinny because it's very hard to replace Stephen Kenny.
Yeah,
you know, it's very, very difficult. But if you're in the Dundalk region tonight, I would definitely get along for the game, because you know, we talk about sport being the triviality that it is, but sport is basically the pressure cooker in front of your eyes, and there's a lot of pressure on that Dundalk management team tonight. Whereas Bows, who are effectively part-time, have conceded 3 goals this season, and at the moment have been the biggest challengers to Shamrock Rovers. Shamrock Rovers have a night off now, so it's a fascinating night. I'm going to go to Pats and Derry in Inchicore. Derry have had a great season, great crowds at the Brandywell, and all of this happened arguably, I would argue, because of the talent within the league at grassroots, the talent within the coaching, and the hunger of fans like Jonathan O'Brien, who was thrown out of Turner's Cross on Friday night to keep the show on the road.
It's interesting when you talk about Dundalk, and we know the financial aspect of the League of Ireland, how it's just not good, but they'd be the only ones possibly with a little bit of money, and it just goes to show sometimes that talent, for a while anyway, at least in the short term, can sometimes trump those with the cash.
It's all down to, like, they got 6 or 7 million from UEFA in 2016. That sort of money is completely unheard of in the League of Ireland. Now, the reason League of Ireland clubs are doing okay at the moment is mainly because of UEFA prize money, and because of the fact these very, very talented players who want to play in Ireland accept wages that are pretty bang average for any of us living in Dublin, for argument's sake. Like, lots of League of Ireland players are playing, they've short careers, but they're earning wages that are decidedly modest, and these lads are not getting extremely rich, and they can't get rich in a league where there is no funding, basically. A professional sport, our most popular sport in the country, in one of the richest countries in the world in which to live, has no prize money, and we've accepted that as being okay, and this has to stop. The reason that we've done okay is because of the talent of the players and an ability from the coaches to say that we want you to play football and entertain people, and I think the league's in a great place in terms of the quality, and anyone who goes to see Pats and Derry tonight will come away and say, actually, that was my first League of Ireland experience, and despite the fact that they've been neglected from above, I actually really enjoyed it, and it's in a good place at the moment. It really is. Galway United, our local club, certainly isn't, but the League of Ireland's in a good place.
Another thing that's in a good place, people would say, is the Dublin football club scene. We saw Rory O'Carroll back. He was playing for Kilmacud over the weekend. Diarmuid Connolly back as well, playing in defence, interestingly enough, and Bernard Brogan as well. He also got 1-6, so it's been a really interesting weekend in the Dublin Club Championship. It might be giving Jim Gavin some new options.
Old options.
New old options, yeah.
German's an interesting one, because I think I've spoken to maybe a couple of people involved, and the notion was that he wouldn't come back, but there's a lot to be said for it, isn't there? You know, if Dublin... The one thing about Dublin this year is you can look at it as a positive that they've lost 3 league games, in that there's a lot of, like, this talk of the invincible 5 in a row now. There's probably a part of Jim Gavin who's kind of happy that there's a lot more belief that Dublin are beatable, and there's not as much talk about this invincibility and the fact that it's the 5 in a row. So that's one thing. But there is also the fact that he's said things post-game that he didn't really say before, where he kind of said this wasn't good enough from the players, particularly that was the Tyrone game. So bringing in the likes of Diarmuid Connolly...
if he brings him in, he might not.
I don't think... I'm not sure at all. I genuinely don't know. It might be a complete non-runner, but it would give them maybe a little bit of a lift, because there probably is a little bit of soul-searching going on within that Dublin team. To be beaten by Tyrone and Croke Park in particular was quite galling. You know, the way games they lost, you could say things went against them, particularly in Kerry. But I don't know, Diarmuid Connolly, I'm not sure how he played the other night or whatever, but the talent is there, and Dublin have a few creaks in their team where you could say that there have a few vulnerabilities, and the likes of Diarmuid coming in psychologically, why not? And
you could argue as well, having Rory O'Carroll coming in, maybe, because if there's one place where the Dubs are vulnerable, it's that high ball coming in.
100%.
The likes of him might be very, very...
But it was something that it was actually a fella from Galway, I remember, making the point to me last year. This is one Dublin deficiency that just hasn't been targeted. Tyrone targeted in the All-Ireland final with a couple of Hail Marys, and they ended up getting a goal out of it, but it was kind of, the game was up at that stage. Galway scored a goal against them from the high ball, and it's very, very hard to defend against a high ball in the box. So it's kind of like, Gaelic football is evolving such that it's so, and Kevin Walsh would certainly attest to this, it's all about possession. But sometimes putting a high ball into the box can result in the bounty of a goal. And goals are so, prized in Gaelic football now that it's definitely the big thing, I think, that they will target Dublin other teams this year.
Well, before we go start talking about Galway again, how great it is, we're talking football next year on OTB AM. We've got Gary Breen, first here's coming up, but first here's Nathan Murphy and Kevin Kilban calling that Salah wonder goal yesterday.